Hello. Welcome to the
Hello.
Yaoi Shelf. That delay, woman.
I'm sorry, I forgot that I actually have to say hello. I was distracted.
I'm glad the roles are back for our Madman AU, where I'm back to being the exasperated martini drunk husband.
Yeah, yeah. It's a better role for you than for me.
Welcome to the Yaoi Shelf. Grab a seat
Welcome.
and relax. Uh, guys, listen. We have been excited about this episode since we started working on it. It has been the machinations of our desperate Fujin brains for several months.
Several
Uh,
minutes.
Several minutes. It's been a long week over here. But we're so glad to have Sam here on the show.
Yay!
I'm glad to be
Welcome,
here.
Sam.
Uh,
Thank you.
this is literally something that we've wanted forever, longer than several minutes, more like several months, honestly. It was one of the first things that was on Carola and I's docket for things that we want to do for the show. And there doesn't seem like there's a better time now than to talk about this thing that Carola and I have nipped at the heels at for a while. But as we said, we are not experts. We do not know how to talk about this without it just being several pained hours of Fujin screeching. So we're calling in the experts. Uh, I am so excited to talk about purity culture and the death of media literacy with Sam of the Fujoshi database, academic researcher extraordinaire, and overall patron saint of all Fujin kind. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a long time too.
Yay!
We're thrilled. You know, our audience knows who you are because we talk about you literally all the time. But for our extended audience, I don't like the way that hit my ear. We talk about you all the time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Would you like to tell our extended listeners a little bit about yourself and your brave, very necessary work during these dark and dreary times?
Thank you. Because sometimes it does feel like everything's just a little like, this is kind of silly, but it's serious, but it shouldn't have to be serious. So we just got to do what we got to do. But yes, I'm Sam. I started doing this research around 2019. Things started to kind of really hit hard around then, particularly like my own social circle. It's usually how it happens. You're like, usually, you grew up avoiding fandom drama, at least when we did. So it's just kind of like, well, I just have to keep avoiding this, and go on about my life until you can't anymore, and then it's your problem. But I primarily just started looking for the roots of issues because I just wanted to understand what's going on, why is this happening, who's really driving it all, because a lot of people just say, oh, this came out of nowhere, this just came out of nowhere, and understanding the core issues of things. And over that time, I've pretty much just built up a goal of like rectifying misconceptions and misinformation about Asian pulp culture media and prejudice in online communities. And while that's extremely wide reaching, I largely focus on like BL, anime, and like issues with anti-Asian racism, particularly like, in fandom culture, because those are such big sources of fandom.
Well, and it's always so fascinating because, like, I know I've brought up like anti-Asian sentiment on the show before, and like it feels like, what are you guys doing? Like, you can't bash the country that this is coming from.
The whole country.
No, but they can.
I mean,
And
but they can't, and they have for decades.
Yeah, and the entire, not only the country, but all of Asia, like
all
of
of
those,
Asia,
all the Asian degenerates. Those were their words, not mine.
And like,
please.
That's what gets it especially weird because, when you look at things in the past, like growing up, it could be kind of 50-50 what you'd get as an artist. Because, like, I'm an artist, and I went to art school, even all of that. And so, like, when I was in, like, middle school, high school, Like one of the discourses in art was just like, oh, anime isn't, that's cheap, it's not good, it's not worth it,
That's
and
not art.
Yeah, but in this case, fast forward like between 10 to 20 years later, and it's like people are fans of it, they worship it, they live it and embody it, but they're just like, those people are child predators, and it's disgusting. Anyway, I love One Piece, And it's like,
it's always something super basic like One Piece, and like not to diss One Piece, just kidding, to fully diss One Piece. Carl, have you forgotten who I am?
There's a pattern. No. I mean, there's a pattern, and you're like, please become self-aware.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about not wanting to support abusers, and then you watch One Piece, but we don't support fictional abusers here. We just support real life ones. Yay!
No, but that is, there's a huge difference because fiction affects reality, and fictional characters can be I don't know.
No, reality is what I want it to be.
Yes.
And so that's my easy out. That's my loophole. So.
Right. So when Eiichiro Oda is like, this pedo's totally fine. Yeah, go rag on My Hero Academia for some reason. Anyways, we could be here all day. So
yeah,
we could be here all day.
We gotta focus.
We could be here all day with me being shady because I am painted to the gods. Let's start with the question that brought us all together, and something that again, Carola and I have nipped at the heels at. But again, this is not our expertise. Willingly, this is not our expertise because we would become like Indiana Jones, like just hermits digging in like caves. Yeah. So we have intentionally tried to keep this out of our foray as much as possible, which is why we called in Sam. What is...
You called me the hermit who's digging in caves.
Yeah. Like, okay, we're just shoving you ahead of us as a shield.
Okay. Yes, but you're much better at it than we are.
Yeah, honestly,
we would be canceled immediately for just yelling at a child. You would at least try to like approach them and treat them with humanity, and I would be full like BL Joe Rogan. Yeah, I'd be BL Joe Rogan just clipped out of context.
Oh my god!
So,
this
is why we called it an expert. What is purity culture in relation to particularly BL fandom?
Okay, let's see. Well, to start off with just a very brief definition of purity culture, it's very much rooted in like evangelical Christianity. Ew. So, and the main thing about it is that the core thing about it is that it takes a strict stance on sexual purity, and like it very much normalizes policing people's bodies, sexual agency, and promoting shame as a response to pleasure, and in other ways also it enables rape culture because it focuses on how the victims themselves brought it upon themselves. Even in just like promoting abuse culture where it's like, well, you like bad things, so bad things are going to happen to you, or bad things have happened to you because you weren't good enough, and fast forwarding to BL culture, my most recent paper that I'm hoping will come out any day now. It's one of those publishing things where they're just like, it could come out like early next month, and it could be like 2 more months. You're like, ah! Like every morning you wake up like checking the page. But the title of that piece is The Influence of Transphobia, Homonationalism, and Anti-Asian Prejudice, Anti-BL Attitudes in English-Speaking Fandom. And the primary focus that I have on how purity culture affects BL fandom specifically is how they take those purity culture aspects and just apply it without realizing how conservative it is. Like the in-between connection would be anti-fan culture, and like you see Christian evangelical like websites, lobbyists, like their core messages are that fiction can enable the abuse of women, cartoon porn is no less dangerous than real life porn. Porn is dangerous, and women don't really have agency, know what they need, and kink bad, you know. They just associate kinks with abuse, etc. And nothing about it is based on science. It's just based in pure feeling, as well as what you've been taught is bad. You know, same with how they'd be like homophobia would manifest itself as, well, that's a sin, you know. And it's, in these cases, you're talking about fiction that has no stance in real life or no direct correlation, and projecting onto people that you are what you read, you know, you are what you draw, while largely ignoring aspects of violence, you know, because you don't know how Christianity loves violence. In America specifically, in Britain, you know.
Yeah.
Well, and in other parts of the world, like there's a lot about like the especially like the evangelical flavor of like Christian mysticism that is inherently incredibly violent. So fun fact about me, I was raised 50-50 by Roman Catholics and an evangelical, anti-science, anti-evolution, anti-Pokemon dad.
Oh my god.
Very specifically anti-Pokemon?
They were they were anti-Pokemon, anti-Harry Potter.
Like, ironically, you're a miracle.
Yeah.
I was like, knowing that, and then knowing what you're like, you know. It's like,
I know, it's a shock, right? Almost like if you put a bunch of dampers on this, you get the drag queen version of Alistair from Has-Been Hotel. Almost like this is what you get as the logical progression when you start saying Pokemon is a satanic symbol. Enjoy that.
You know, this is just, it's so wild to me. Again, pointing out the cultural differences living in Norway. I've only read about these things, you know, like the anti-Pokemon, anti-Harry Potter, everything is satanic. Like I read about this, and like, so
I
actually knowing
I'm
someone who experienced it is so wild.
I feel like the bridge between you, because like I experienced it by proxy, but my parents were like pretty normal and great, honestly. Like, you know, even if they found my BL, they'd just be like, huh, okay, you know, and then move it along.
My aunt found my BL, hated it, told me that I was going to hell, and asked me what I knew about choking on ball gags, to which I responded, do you really want to know? Because I'm 17 years old.
Oh my god.
But yeah, Dad's church didn't believe in evolution. Creation happened all at once. Human beings rode dinosaurs like horses.
Oh, that was kind.
Yeah.
That was kind.
That was the kind of church that I grew up in.
That's like the evangelical of evangelical.
That is wild.
There's one museum some guy made where they have like people and dinosaurs together.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I haven't been to that one, but I've been to the one in Texas.
Oh man.
Again, like I just don't like, again, coming from a very secular country where it's like, if you know, like, we obviously have religious people here, so like if I meet someone who's like Muslim, I'm like, okay, you know, that's cool because I understand Muslims, you know. But then meeting a Christian, I'm like, those exist? Like, for real?
It's like real life jump scare.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's just because we're so secular, and it's so strange.
But there were so many things that like flagged in my head as you were talking about it, because like that was growing up with an evangelical dad, was that, you know, anything that you watch that isn't ideologically pure, and like ideologically pure in the sense that like, very, very heteronormative, very patriarchal, and still upholding a lot of white supremacy, which was very, very funny, especially for us as a Black family.
How does that even work?
So there's
Colonialism.
yeah. So there's this thing called tokenism, where our pastor like really used me and my family. Like, look at these good, upstanding Browns and how moral they are, and they aren't like the other Browns that are all into the hip hop and the sagging pants and the doing crack cocaine. Look at these Browns. Yeah, look at this good, God-fearing group of Browns.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and then my dad died, and that pastor never spoke to me and my family again.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that is great.
Well, no, he did to affirm that my mother's then drug-dealing boyfriend had aspirations of being my father, to which I almost punched him and his wife in a hospital. So
I love that for you.
Oh my
God. I was like, do it! It's also so on brand, too. You're like, I was punched in the hospital. I'm like, yeah!
I had to physically be restrained. I was like 13. I was ready to fight. I was literally ready to fight God. I was like, my aunt physically had to hold me back because I was about to throw hands in this hospital.
You're too powerful.
Were you fully grown by then?
Fuck off!
No, I'm just asking. Like, were you like a tiny child, or were you like?
I mean, I was 13, so I was like maybe 5 feet. Maybe.
You know, I was done growing when I was 12.
Of condensed power. I have a friend who's 5'2", and she was a wily one.
Yeah, I'm 5'1", and I literally would fight God. But there's all these things within purity culture that, are really evangelical in the sense that, like, it's promoting a lot of heteronormativity, it's promoting a lot of white supremacy, it's promoting a lot of, there is no gray area between fiction and reality, except for the fiction that they like proposing, i.e. the Bible. Their fiction is important. Their fiction matters a lot. Today Amanda chose violence, and I apologize. But there's this really, really fascinating aspect to it. So, like, like when I was growing up in that church, like Pokemon was like this satanic thing of like, how dare you? They're based on yokai. Like, wow, you guys know a Japanese word,
Wow.
They'd be like, I'm just like, wow, I'm impressed.
Right, like, great job.
Impressive.
Oh, shit.
What?
Like they're based on little demons.
White people knowing yokai before Yokai Watch?
I know. Really? It was almost impressive, except for I didn't get to play Pokemon, and that was like a real deal breaker for me when I was a kid. And that, like, Harry Potter, like, obviously we can't watch Harry Potter now for different reasons, but back in those days, it was, if your child reads this, it's because they want to be a witch or a wizard.
It was literally, there's literally just because there's magic in it. It didn't matter if you were, but we're fighting the bad guys. No, same rules as D&D, magic, bad.
It's Satan. As much Christian allegory as, like, Tolkien or anything else. Because of the people who wrote it. But
pretty sure they hate Tolkien, to be fair.
I don't think they knew who Tolkien was.
At least there, probably.
It was a very limited, like, segment of intelligence.
Okay. Because, I'm just thinking about how, the hippies saved Lord of the Rings. And the conservatives like to also be like, fuck those hippies. So it's like...
Yeah, that's your headcanon about our history.
Thank you for theorizing about our history. Our pastor...
You're welcome.
Whose literal name was Wayne Force.
Oh my god.
Pastor Force.
This is my Star Wars OC Wayne Force.
This is my Star Wars Batman crossover OC Wayne Force.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
It sounds like a DC villain.
Give Batman a Darth Vader helmet. I'm getting off topic.
Oh god.
With the little pointy ears.
Yes, but there's all these interesting things about it. And I think what's interesting to me also is, I watch a lot of ContraPoints because obviously, look at me, I watch a lot of ContraPoints. There's this overlap in that audience that, like, these are people that would say that they're leftist, that would say that they're Democrats, that would say that they're socially liberal, but they keep projecting these incredibly conservative ideas. And I'm fascinated by that disconnect because when we were younger, especially in the US, I grew up in Texas. The history that I was taught was not the history of America.
And I grew up in Minnesota, far north.
Right. So, like, the history of America that I was taught was not history. It was slavery was a chill thing that happened, and slave owners took great care of their dominion and possession. And
Mm-hmm.
the Civil War was the war of northern aggression.
Those
Carola,
really those mean guys.
yeah, those mean northerners who just wanted equality and to ruin the southern economy. But so I don't understand why these like terminally online gremlins
Mm-hmm.
don't see that they're falling for the same trap.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where it gets frustrating for me is like looking at them and being like, listen, I was born in a generation where we were posting smut fic on like LiveJournal and Zanga. We didn't have a chance.
Mm-hmm.
You kids know better, or you should know better. And, that dovetails us into the avatar, the persona of who is spreading it. These are children, right?
It's like I would say you have the turfs at the head, and then who like they're the ones throwing out the little crumbs, and then young people who do not know any better eat that up, because like the next thing I was going to segue into on this topic is like it's the issue comes from the specific area of like rad femmes, gender criticals, where they attach their activism to conservative rhetoric, but they try to make it like it's for marginalized people, in the sense of like, well, like the most basic one is like, well, this fiction promotes abuse against women, and this fiction, women will read this and they'll be more likely to go ahead with red flag relationships, and if men will read this, they'll think, oh man, okay, this is what women want, and when you think about it just from like a real chill perspective, it sounds reasonable. It's like, well, it doesn't sound too out there,
right.
until you realize that they'll say this about basically anything they don't personally like. For instance, one website I focus on a lot, they used to be called Morality and Media. Now they've rebranded as Anti-Sex Trafficking. Wow, I wonder how we got there,
Wow, yeah.
Well, we're just focusing on media. And so the big thing was that, like, that you get into the area where you start reading articles by the people pushing this, and when you start to dig in, you'll find women who are like, 50 Shades of Grey, this is back in like 2013, 50 Shades of Grey is pedophilia.
What?
And they go on a long description, but it's the same exact stuff that you see today in like online community reasoning with young fans. Is there'll be some of the reasons that were given would be like, this is pedophilia because the adult main character, she can act childish at times. There's a scene where, I guess, because I never read it, oh no, they use baby oil. The word baby is in there.
Yeah.
You know where this is going, people. And so if you support 50 Shades of Grey, you support pedophilia. And this is 11 years ago plus, 11 plus years ago.
I was part of that in the sense that I am still very anti 50 Shades, and obviously that is because of the terrible portrayal of BDSM and glorifying of toxic relationships. But I don't think pedophilia is not the first word that comes to mind. I feel
and even in that sense, when it comes to these claims, they never follow up on them. They project as like, what could be, this could happen, this will happen if we don't ban it, but they never did any studies. You have 50 Shades, it's been like 10, 11 years since the book and the movie, and Game of Thrones, all the TV shows that people like this hate and say will make people do bad things, that you have a huge research pool for, never do anything with it. They never do any follow-up research, likely because there wouldn't be anything to go off of.
But I also think that even if there was, they wouldn't listen to it, because it's like what you. Right. I was reading your hate narratives paper, where you talked a lot about how they are, they're essentially, they're anti-science. So even if even if there is evidence, they just
Mhm.
choose to disregard it because if it
Yes.
doesn't fit into their biased narrative, they'll just, oh, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter then.
And there's been
No.
multiple instances too, just real quick, that
Mhm.
I've seen multiple instances where people will link like a paper and the paper actually disproves their argument. This happened at least a couple times in the past year for me, but that's
Oh
where the
my
lack of
God.
literacy literally comes in. It's like you didn't
Yeah.
read the whole thing, or you saw a part you liked, but you didn't absorb it to understand what it was actually saying.
Right. And I think I want to tie it back to BL because, if you've listened to
Mm-hmm.
this show for a
Yeah.
while, you've heard me talk about this. So, like, there's so much of me that almost sees where some of these points are coming from. But, like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, if you do read a bunch of fiction that only shows abuse and abuse of all types, of course it's going to
Mm-hmm.
do something to you psychologically. Um, but the idea then of one, victim blaming actual victims is where you lose me. And
Mm-hmm.
then two, that onus is on media that isn't aimed at that audience to begin with. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, I was definitely one of those kids that was affected by reading nothing but non-con from
Mm-hmm.
age like 14 to 17.
Mm-hmm. And I
That's
think
not that's not the mangaka's fault.
right. And the other aspect too is that it's like even just using yourself and I as like examples, like the house, like the environment you grew up in, and that like restricted, restrained setting versus like in my personal life, I was thankfully surrounded by a lot of positive, or at least healthy, pretty equal relationships, in general. And so like when I would read this manga and stuff, it was just completely different from real life to me. It's like that's just in the books,
Yeah.
that's just in the movies. And so even reading Loveless as like a 14, 15-year old,
Loveless.
I was like, oh wow, this is so cool. But I wasn't gonna be like, I want to date my teacher.
No, exactly.
So and that's why it's really important when people don't like take into account like real life. In that sense, real life matters more than just the material itself,
Well, right.
Yeah.
And like
and the
a person,
background.
yeah, like a person's history, a person's background, like all of that matters so much more. And I think it's interesting to bring up one that there's a lot of turfs within this movement.
Yeah.
Because as we've discussed, like the Fujin Pipeline episode, a lot of us are queer.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us,
Yep.
especially those of us who are older and,
Mm-hmm.
at first totally didn't think that they were queer, cough me, you know,
Also
Hi.
me.
yeah,
I'm an
hi.
enthusiastic ally.
Right. Like who totally didn't realize that, like, oh hey, I feel really, really comfortable writing as a man and dressing as a man and living as a man. That surely has nothing to do with my own gender expression.
Yeah.
No, those
No.
are not related at all.
Not related.
I just really, really enjoy voice acting Yuki Eri. That's all it is.
I mean, that is fair. I just want to.
and then you just go on the part where you're just like, well, I'm just a tomboy, or you're like, I'm just weird.
Yeah.
Oh, weird tomboy.
Well,
you just talk it up to anime fan.
I was the worst because I was one of those like in-logs. It's like, I'm not like other girls. I like anime comics, and I don't like makeup because I'm not girly like that, and I like all the things that kids like.
I was in the boat where I was like always a little bit more mask presenting, I just liked where I was comfortable. I liked wearing my anime t-shirts, even if they were like girls' shirts,
Yeah.
But I would just be like, well, I guess I'm just ugly. That was just the end of it, because I was like, I don't feel like putting on makeup and like dressing real effeminate, and this is like middle school. I'm like, I guess this is my life, and somebody be like, politely, that's just like, oh, well, if you want, it's like, well, then dress like this more, put makeup, and I'm like, it feels even worse to put that stuff on, you know? But you just chalk it up to being like stubborn or something.
Yeah, and I was really stubborn. I was like, I refused to do, like, I was very much a tomboy, to the point where I went by a boy name when I was a child, and And I refused to start wearing makeup when all my friends did. And to the point where I got really, really stubborn. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I started wearing skirts when I discovered Visual K because I thought that was a masculine presentation. But if I ever put a little bit of makeup on, all my friends who were all guys would be like, "What the fuck is wrong with your face?" So I was like, I guess I'm going back to being anti because clearly this is not me. And as a result, I suck at cosplaying because I never learned how to do makeup. So
You're a
I
great
burned
cosplayer.
myself.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Thank you.
You're a
Thank
good
you.
cosplayer.
It's just because I normally, when we cosplay together, I don't have this camera where you can see every pore of my face.
Yeah, there's a reason why I'm streaming in 720p. Like, you guys don't need to see high def Amanda. You don't need to see high def me.
But you guys do need to see Raihan.
I mean, that's a good sight.
Yeah.
That's a good sight. So I think it's fascinating, you know, when you talk about like, who is writing it, that one, there are a lot of TERFs at the start of it. Two, that it is young people kind of getting caught up in it. Anyways, but it's fascinating that there's, I mean, obviously TERFs are in everything. And for those of you who don't know, TERFs are trans exclusionary radical feminists. Gender critical are under that group of TERFs. And their big talking points are socialization, and they don't want men invading female spaces, and that if trans radicalization exists, then there'll be no women and everyone will just be trans. Like there's like a trans beam, and that that there'll no longer be women, that will all just be trans. But one, that's not like, I mean, like just off the top, none of that is true.
No.
You can't magic up a trans person. Like,
yeah, it's just recycled homophobia too, because the same thing would be like, well, being gay is trendy now, and you're like, well, maybe if people don't kill me, I feel more comfortable coming out of the closet. You know,
it's literally the same arguments being regurgitated.
It's all the same, and I think that might be one of the reasons why, especially us older fans, like cope with this so poorly. Is that we've seen this recycled 30 times. Right.
And younger people have not. Like, the only way they grew up with this concept is that, you know, they grew up with more open-minded shows, which is great. And then you had these, like, you had weird TERFs and rad femmes coming in, like, if you like abuse if you like this couple of, like, of gem characters together, you know, then you support abuse. I didn't make it. They did. Anyways, you know.
In that sense, I think that I appreciate so much more being an adult in this space now because, I mean, it's driving me up the wall. Like, clearly, you know, I open Twitter and my life is ruined every single day. But I'm so glad I'm old enough to, you know better. And, like, even if I am the target, like I haven't been personally harassed, but like even if I am the target as someone who is, you know, pro ship and an adult in fandom spaces, etc., my brain is fully developed and I know that I'm not doing anything wrong, and I am not in a space where I am, you know, easily manipulated and easily led to believe that I have to have these correct beliefs and opinions, and you know, falling victim to this very, very cultish rhetoric that is so much more impressionable if you're young.
Well, because like, oh, you want to go ahead? Or...
Well, and cultish in the sense that, like, again, you know, so it's like for us, you know, I think this hits particularly hard for us American fans because, like, this is all stuff we've heard so many times before. And, like, I'm not saying that homophobia doesn't exist all over, but, like, again, like, I grew up with these literal evangelicals telling me these things. Like, so it's weird.
First, it was Harry Potter and D&D and rock music. And even before that, it was jazz. Like, jazz will make turn you to sin, you know.
And even before that, there were books. Okay.
There were books.
Oh my God, books. Oh my God, Lois.
You know what?
Think of the children.
That's the reason all the kids are autistic and queer now. They started letting them read hundreds of years ago.
You know,
it's
100-year-old minor.
Right. You know,
Must,
it's
must I
fascinating to think
remind
about.
you?
Yes.
Must I remind you of the? I can't remember which year this was it 1700s or something when the Sorrows of Young Werther came out, and there was a suicide wave in Europe where all of these young people read it and killed themselves, and all of the conservatives, like all the men, were like, "We have to stop the youth from reading books because now they're killing themselves." It's the same thing.
I wish Americans cared that much about that kind of stuff because we're
Oh my
busy.
god, it is
Right.
The,
so
the last
funny.
the last book panic I remember was being Catholic and being told not to read Angels and Demons by Dan Brown.
I remember hearing some discourse about that.
Oh, there was discourse,
Oh my
baby.
god.
There was so much discourse.
But I mean, now there's a new book ban every week, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with being very vague about like porn harms, and then the porn they're talking about is critical race theory and sex
Right.
ed books.
Right.
You know, or like a yaoi novel, and you're like, yes, that's going to radicalize my child to homosexuality, not a Andrew Tate or anything. Not that Andrew Tate loves the gays.
Yeah, it's not going to be Candace Owens or anything like that. It's going to be,
Oh,
you know, it's
Yeah.
going to be Sasaki and Miyano that radicalizes my child.
They're going to radicalize.
I mean,
And it's like the issue with that activism approach, you know, from TERFs and gender criticals on social media, like, you know, like you just imagine, you know, logging on to Gaia Online or like whatever, Neopets, whatever the hell you liked as like a 13, 14-year-old, and somebody is just like, did you know that these women hurt gay men? They hate them. They use them. They abuse them, and they harm everything. They're like an infection, and so they're anti-LGBTQ, you know, and you don't know they're talking about like trans men. And you're like 13, you're like, oh my god, I have to do something, you know. And then so you just spread the word because it seems it's like such a reasonable to you, your first introduction to activism, and somebody's like, you know, they say it in a way that makes sense, like, oh my god, those women are terrible, when like half the time they're just trans masculine or like trans men and just like existing.
or they're just vibing.
Yeah,
like honestly,
you know,
like, not even, like they're just fucking vibing, like enjoying a thing, and it's.
And then like they attach you know, media and then behaviors, you know, it's like, you know, rabid fangirls, yaoi fangirls, and these are, you know, teenagers that were like figuring out that they were queer in some degree, you know, or like even just like building up friendships, you know, they weren't like harming anyone, even if, you know, they were young straight women just figuring themselves out, and then they become public enemy number one.
yeah.
You know, and so combine that with the viralness of social media. You see a TikTok, I see a TikTok, I make a stitch, I repost a meme, and then it's just the culture that we're embedded in. Where it's like, oh yeah, these people are bad, oh they're cringe, oh they suck, they hate, you know, they're really bad for us, and so like that's what people need to remember, is that like you have to put yourself in the shoes of like your 13, 14-year-old self and think about like, what the hell could have happened to me if I was like brought into that like radicalized zone of like, you know, because there's one post I always remember where somebody's just like, I know there's a lot of 13-year-old girls on this site that think like BL and think it's really cool, but it's really not, and it really harms people and hurts people like me. And their username is like anti-pedo, you know, anti-map person, and they're like addressing 13-year-olds on Tumblr and telling them, if you want to be a good person, you know, and then you see like a 13-year-old quote retweet like, Fujos are stinky, you know, literally, they tag Fujos are stinky, you know, and you're like, it's so unserious to them, but also at the same time so serious, because then suddenly they're like 20 years old or like 25, and they just unironically believe all of this because they've never been challenged otherwise.
Yeah, and then you get things like, I mean, slightly off topic, but still related, like what has been going around my Twitter feed all morning with the whole 21 is a child adult.
Yeah.
And And if you are,
Or like 19 is still a teenager because the word teen is in it.
yeah, and if you are 25 plus, you cannot interact with me because you're an adult and you should know better.
Yeah.
I'm so
That was
tired.
my morning.
My morning has been dealing with Has Been season 1 spoilers fallout, so I won't say anything. I think that brings us to an interesting point of why are these folks so focused on, I have it in the outline as anime and manga, but I want to keep it really, really close into BL because we see this a lot with anime and manga in general, that like they seem to be really, really focused on that when there's Western properties that do very, very similar, if not the same fucking thing all the time. And we have talked about it on the show constantly that it's like, if you're going to be mad about this here, you need to be mad about it everywhere. Like that's like, I get being mad, but you can't just be mad about it in Asia.
Yeah,
You
but
need
it's
to be
like,
mad about it.
Yeah, but
Literally-
let me hit you in. It's free
Yeah.
real estate.
no, I literally
I'm making the
opened
hand gesture. It's free real estate.
YouTube like yesterday, and there was something. I can't even remember what this was at this point. It was, I don't know. I think it was like a book or something, and it's like, you know, like X is problematic, and here's why. I'm like, of course
Yep.
it is, because every single piece of media is going to have something that you're going to disagree with, or not vibe with, or that is somehow problematic.
You know what it is?
Media.
What is it?
What is it?
It's the depth. I'm not saying there's never discourse in, like, you know, the superhero fandom, because there is. But when you come into like,
I haven't.
When I think about think about the most recent discourse surrounding series aside from anime and manga, Steven Universe, The Owl House. Both of these shows center, yes, Voltron as well, center queer characters to some degree. Yes. But they also try to go the extra mile and add some like depth in there, some like black, like not black and white, kind of gray areas. Yeah. And it's not to say like no other show ever did that, like Avatar: The Last Airbender, you know, etc. Shows like that. But when I think about what if Atla came out today as a cartoon, people, like, all the arguments would just be like, if you like Zuko, you a bad person, you know. And yes, Zuko, yeah, you know, and just stuff like that, or like, you know, I hate Sokka and he's a bitch, you know. And if you like him, you hate women. Well, you know, and it's like episode 2.
We are arguing
right now.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, like we're gonna tone down Sokka's sexism. The sexism of the 14-year-old boy, we're going to tone that down. But I think what's fascinating to me is that this really seems to happen a lot in BL spaces. And it goes back to, again, if you haven't listened to the episode that we had about fetishization with Dr. Thomas, this is a good place to remind you guys of that. Because, there is this like air of mystery that still comes from this particular space. And because of that, BL tends to find itself the unwilling participant in a lot of these conversations, or queer ships in shonen, or honestly just adults in fandom still. Like, I know when I was growing up, I was always told that anime was going to be a phase that I grew out of, that it was for children. Shut up. That it was for children, and that I would surely stop doing all of this. I would stop any day now. Any day, I'll just wake up and I'll be done with it.
Yeah.
And that
those adults didn't know about Ninja Scroll. You're like, it's been here the whole time. What the hell are you talking about?
Like those
like, anime's always been for adults, which is why it's always been so popular, because you know, and then people associate cartoons, with children. That's the other thing. And so, like, anytime anything goes beyond like Ooga Baby, like levels of stuff happening here, people are like, oh my god, they're trying to convert the children with their cute cartoon characters, and you're like, no, I just still like them as an adult.
When I'm over here just a full teenager, like, how do I become, what is the fastest route to being a villain fucker?
I think you found
I did. I hopped on the express route to that at like I jumped on the express train down the villain fucker highway when I was like 12 or 13. But it's fascinating to see so much of this happen in anime and manga again, because there is a lot of concern that anything coming out of the East is just porn, anything.
Yeah.
That, you know, because ratings are different than they are here, you know, things that are aimed at teenagers in Japan are things that I wouldn't necessarily say are appropriate for teenagers here in America due to a myriad of reasons. So it's fascinating to see anime and manga really become like the place for this discourse to happen. And again, as Sam mentioned, this discourse has happened in other properties, especially again when you start getting into those queer ships, because you bring
and
up
a lot of those shows
yes.
are still influenced by anime too. That's the interesting
Yeah.
part as well.
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca Sugar's dirty Fujo fingers are all over Steven Universe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I say that also having dirty Fujo fingers, like that isn't a call out. That's just fact.
Yeah,
Fact. I
it's,
also
it's the way people. It's the way people behave and project about her. Like,
yeah. I mean, Rebecca Sugar is not my favorite human being all the time, but that's for different reasons. But I'm fascinated by the fact that, like, yeah, this always seems to come back to anime and manga, and there's this like huge blind spot in Western properties. Like, I was watching a the Take video about Gilmore Girls. Like, I never really watched Gilmore Girls because I was like trying to be a man at that time, so I wasn't watching Gilmore Girls. And just listening to like, oh, and Rory's mom fucked her teacher, and then Rory got pregnant by this random guy, and then all of this happened, and she slept with her ex-husband, and now everyone's having an affair, and the dad was sleeping with some girl who was 40 years younger than him. It's like, why are we talking about?
And that's just like classic, like soap opera territory.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. You know, there's a twist. There's always some crazy shit happening, and that was like standard daytime TV.
It was.
Yeah.
It was like, why aren't we mad at Glee? I mean, I'm mad at Glee. Carola's mad
I
at
mean,
Glee. Everyone's
people are mad at Glee.
I was gonna say, to be fair, I've never even watched it, and I know everyone's mad at Glee. Aside from Glee,
I mean, they didn't have that one serial guy,
and I hated it.
But it's like there's so many things that you can be upset about. There's so many things you can be upset about. And while I'm never going to say that there are not problematic things in anime and manga, because I'd be a fucking liar.
Yeah.
It just seems so short-sighted to only be mad in this space.
I think it's just because it's a really easy target. You know, he who cast the first stone. For example, just like the most basic example in politics is a lot of times, you know, you'll see conservatives like trash like more progressives for like barely doing like the least bad thing. Meanwhile, they'll have like actual pedophiles, you know, being convicted, or they solicited minors, and they're still in public office.
Yeah.
And it's like, wash your own laundry before you come into my house, you know. and
I think actually you can go on.
Oh, okay. And I was like, and like one of the things that like I get into with this topic and like paper is that like, especially when it comes to BL, it's like it's a very easy target for like several reasons. One, it's associated with women, femininity. You know, that's the other thing about those other shows that have huge discourse. Not just Voltron, aside from that, but you know, the Owl House and Steven Universe, they had presumed, you know, female heterosexual creators. You know, a lot of people would erase Rebecca Sugar's queer identity and pronouns, etc. But it's associated, you know, with women and femininity, already like failed step one. And then going beyond that is that it's, you know, a different language, whereas you can change what the words mean like very easily. People be like, oh, yaoi means exclusively porn, and Fujoshi literally means rotten woman. So it means they know they're rotten and they take pride in it because they think gay people are rotten, you know. And then they just roll with it, you know. There's nobody else in the room, you know. It's all the way across the ocean. You'd have to go for somebody to correct them. And so it's so much easier for it to just, you know, spread like wildfire. And like the other aspect of that too is that it's Asian. So a lot of people just view Asian media or just Asia in general as, you know, this weird, exotic, not to be taken too seriously. Like it's not like an anomaly, but you know, it's something to spectate and look at from the outside. Just like the way they treat Japan in itself. Like when you get people in like evangelical sites and you get TERFs and radfems talking about Japan, and they'll always talk about it like the other, the sinful, the weird. They're trying to convert the children. I don't know what it is about anime and trans, you know. And they make up like, it's almost like a game in a sense that they get fulfillment just making up stuff and like creating this like boogeyman, like yokai, we'll say instead of demon, you know, this yaoi yokai. And they just, and then they use that as, you know, their big bad, quote unquote, that they just kind of paint broadly, and they just, they live it as the reality, so it becomes the reality to other people. And it's just like, and then you get to the, you know, TLDR, like BL fetishizes gay men, and Fujoshi fetishizes gay men, and even gay men who like BL are fetishizing themselves. You know? And so, you know, it's that's like the long of the short of it, you know.
No, and I mean, like, that's all true. I mean, you definitely, I remember we had G4, which was like a channel for men who play video games.
I watched that sometimes.
I mean, I did. Hello, man who plays video games. Man who plays video games. But it was like very like 2000s, 2010s humor. It would definitely get canceled today. But they had on the original like Ninja Warrior from Japan. And I always remember looking at that. And like by this time, I knew about Japan a little bit. I've been watching anime most of like my life by that point. And it always just looked so foreign and crazy. And you're right, like we do, a lot of Westerners still look at Japan as this very like foreign other. And again, and I feel like I say this every episode, there are so many things that I can almost understand when people look at a lot of this stuff, because wow, a lot of those BL roots that are from Sojo sure did import a lot of things that are truly and seriously problematic. But again, that's the case across all of the genres, because a lot of them have imported their baggage from really Sojo and shonen, which also has its own problematic baggage, you know. And then again, you need to also be able to flip that on your own stuff, because that exists in the West as well. Not to alienate when Japan does something problematic, but they're not alone. I mean,
they don't talk about it constructively, you know. You'll get like one of those vague tweets where it's just like, remember, I don't know if you saw, someone's like, remember who else Japan agreed with? And like trying to insinuate they were Nazis. And I was like, is this about like, you know, is this about nasty guys who are like trying to be weird about like real women and like be like transphobic or like shit? Or is this about like a black butler doujinshi, you know? Like, because it was all about like, like, why are we using Japan to base our morals off of, you know?
We're not!
And it's like, we're just trying not to be racist and like and understand science actually. Thank you. You know?
Yeah, but you know, piggybacking off of that, I think, because I mean we do this here too, you know, like if there's some show that is about like, for instance, you know, dating in Japan, it's almost like watching some sort of like wildlife documentary, because they're talking about the Japanese and then they're always like trying to twist it in the most like
weird, I have to say something related to that, because I'll never forget the documentary on Netflix that was going over some Netflix made anime, and it was the whitest, most like racist thing I had seen in such a long time. I was blown away, because the way this woman started off the documentary was, I don't know anything about anime. We're like, oh, we're gonna film step one. And so she just, you know, she jumped into it, but the way she talked about like Japanese people was like, just like, imagine, it was like summary is like Japanese people seem so quiet, and she's like
Yeah.
footage of a bus train with people quiet.
Yeah.
And then she's like, how does this Japanese people being normal in like everyday society go to this? And then she like showed a bunch of like violent clips from anime and like people in a dance club. And I was just like, I'm just imagining that in like LA. Like I want Asian people to come to the United States and like look at us like we're ants under a microscope and be like, how do these people go from this working at the DMV like a normal person to this, and you show them at an anime convention. Yeah. Like,
but what? I mean, that sounds like me in Japan, though.
It was like
that sounds like yes.
The Western world has this obsession, right, with weird Japan.
Yes.
And how and
they just see them like people.
Yeah, and they're
a phenomenon.
They continue to perpetuate these ideas and these wrong ideas and ideals, because it's kind of like that, how every so often you'll see usually a dude bro appearing on Twitter and being like, oh, remember that the age of consent in Japan is 13. Okay, first of all, that has been debunked so many times, but you are continuing to cling to it because you want it to be sensationalized.
Yeah. That's the irony is the people who claim that there are tourists are tourists. They're like, Japan is a nationalistic ideal, and you're like, have you never read a book from Japan pre like 1900? They're like, gays didn't exist, and like, I have something to tell you about that.
And
like,
it's like
they're living in their own fantasy, ironically.
And it's like, and again, because people don't have history and people don't want to seek out, like, even if you tell them, you link them to the truth, you link them to some, academic research, whatever, they don't want to hear it, right? And so these, when taking it back to BL, the discussions and the discourse that we're seeing now, it's not new, because I mean, go back to the early 90s in Japan and the Yaoi Ronso, it's literally the same thing, but like BL has progressed. Fandom has progressed. Like in Japan, in lieu of the Yaoi Ronso, a lot of people started taking that debate, and which was the Japanese debate about oh, this is gay men being fetishized, essentially. And a lot of Japanese Fujin took that to heart and kind of like changed the way they talked about gay men in BL because of that. And
even some gay men also changed it. I believe Misaki Sato, if that was his name.
Masaki Sato.
Like there was a follow-up that we don't hear about often that Akiko Mizuguchi mentioned in like her thesis, which was basically like after they actually communicated and met and spoke about things, he understood how it was so useful for some women, or people assumed to be women, especially at that time, figure out their gender identity and navigate sexuality in a very very narrow space. That was kind of all they had, and he was like, and I think basically he basically just says that that's fine. He's like, all I want is for just more stories to be told. I want to be more dimension. And everyone's like, great, we all win,
Yeah, and then that is completely being disregarded. I mean, a lot of people don't know about it, but even if they do, they disregard it because they want to perpetuate their idea, because it's a confirmation bias, essentially, right?
Yeah. Right. It is a confirmation bias. And it's a lack of introspection, like global introspection, because so like I have a literature background. For me, that's always Lolita. Everyone wants to be mad at Lolita. No one who's actually read.
I still need to read it. It's on my list. I'm gonna try to read it this year so I can understand that.
Yeah,
and it's
when
always
you read it's
I mean, so like for me, it's always been Lolita. It's people who've never read Lolita who are the most upset about Lolita. It's people who've never been in the same room as Lolita who are the most upset about Lolita. Like, they've never looked at the cover. They've not been in the same room. They don't know who wrote it. They just know to be mad at Lolita.
Yeah, for all the wrong reasons. Like,
and then when you finally read it, it's like, oh, I'm mad at this because it's boring.
Okay.
And to jump off of that too is like people will be like, I'm mad at this because I don't know anything. As in like all of the white ladies that you see who are mad at Lolita because they think that the fashion statement has something to do with the book and it's pedophilia, and you're like, stop talking, But they'll like write papers and blog posts about it. You're like, you've never even lived in Japan for like a month.
No.
And they're just like, it's disgusting. They go into hysterics about it and everything, and it's like with BL, misinformation.
And when they are like, if they are proven wrong, that because there's nothing sexualized. I mean, there's nothing sexual about Lolita fashion. Like there are a lot of layers. There's a lot of
literally, there's a lot of layers.
Yeah, like there is no skin showing, and then they're like, well, they are infantilizing themselves, so it's essentially pedo bait. It's like, okay, what?
And then we get into the victim blaming again.
Yeah, exactly.
We're trying to attract predators. You're like, do you understand how fucked up you sound right now?
Yeah, that is exactly.
And it's wild too, because they'll be like, why are adult women trying to attract child predators? And you're like, I don't know, actually.
It's the short circuit of like, doesn't make any sense. Like, so I remember my favorite one was if you are a woman under like 5'5" and a man dates you, it's because you're minor coded.
You're child coded.
And it's like, firstly, I'm 5'1". Secondly, anyone who looks at me, hears me speak, has experienced me in the bedroom, knows that I'm not. Anyone who has been to one of my convention panels and has heard every single joint of mine creak like I'm one of those artist dolls.
I mean, true. No, I ask myself this a lot because like I look very young, and I am balancing right on the average, so I don't know if I'm child coded or not. Like I could be both. but then I am older than my girlfriend, so technically that makes me the predator in our relationship, but she looks older than me. So we're always like, who is?
And then you get into the conundrum, like the Twilight Zone.
I'm trying to figure out which one is more problematic in this relationship based on what I see.
Spider-Man meme, you're pointing at each other.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to advocate for your girlfriend's rights. That's the gift that she wants. She wants emancipation.
And also, she's taller than me. So I don't know.
But like, I think it's amazing that, this always keeps coming back to anime and manga because like Japan really is this open field that people can project our own insecurities and fears on, just in the way that like,
and not be challenged too.
And not be challenged. And to bring it back to a point that you made at the start, because so if you saw both of us visually cringe when one of those sites changed to stop child trafficking, it's because of QAnon. So if you saw all of us visually, just like the color leave our bodies, it's because of QAnon. And it's the anti-science fact of it. Because, so here's the thing. We have all been dumb in fandom spaces. Raise your hand if you were dumb in a fandom space.
Raising our hands.
Raising the hand.
Yeah. But we had our elders, one, to challenge us and tell us to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And two, we listened to them when we were corrected, and we did our own research and formed our own opinions, and we
didn't have social media.
Yeah, we did not.
We didn't have social media. But, because like I know I've probably spat off a dumb hot take at least 5 times. I'm certain of it, especially in the anime and manga space. The way I grew up, I've absolutely ran off with a dumb hot take. But we had our fandom elders that we listened to with reverence. And then we went back and we did our own research. So we could say, okay, well, half of what that random 40-year-old man on adultfanfiction.net was correct.
I think that was the other thing too, is just in that era was like, it's like we had websites each other and then like the bookstore, so it's like if I want to know about Japan, I go onto like the Japanese blog site, usually run by like people living in Japan.
Right.
If I want to learn Japanese, I get some books, and then like also too, a lot of people would just have like information on pages like bishi equals this and a lemon is this a lime, and they would translate words, and it was like a fun little like almost like a secret culture because you're like anime wasn't half as popular, so you could be the anime kid like in your grade, in your class at school.
Yeah.
And so like
hi, that was me.
But I think
and so like it wasn't necessarily like you didn't go online to like be an activist, you went online to have fun. No. And so we would learn while having fun. Yes. And you weren't necessarily taught like the absolute wrongest thing and then go out there and try to like tell everyone else to do it. It's such a different mindset.
Yeah. Or if you were me, you were learning because you were Black and female presenting, and everyone was convinced that you were just doing this as a phase to attract male attention.
Oh yeah, that was.
Yeah. But it's there's such a massive gap between the fandom wank that we had. We called it fandom wank. There were shipping wars, flame wars. That was, and now they are activists. There's such a massive gap between flaming someone because you didn't like the pairing they wrote, even though you chose to read the fic, and reporting someone to the police because you think they're a pedophile.
Or stalking them at conventions.
Or stalking someone you think is them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which was the thing that happened.
Undertale. Sorry. Something was stuck in my throat from many years ago. Undertale fandom is still one of the fandoms that scares me the most because they won't leave.
You're like, go! And you like yell out of your Hobbit window, like, go!
It's like, so I live in Texas. We have bats, and sometimes bats get in your house.
I like bats.
No, they're great. I love them. But sometimes they get in your house. And bats, because they're bats, only learned how to fly tangentially.
Yeah.
They're not good at it. They're not good, accomplished flyers. So imagine getting a bat in your house. Yeah, that's how Undertale fans feel like. No one knows how the bat got inside. It could have been anything. Maybe you left your door open too long while bringing in the groceries. Maybe it was always there, living in the attic.
Maybe you wrote a problematic fic and somebody wanted to tell you that they didn't like it, but repeatedly and evaded touch.
Right. Maybe you wrote a problematic fic, not involving them at all, but they're there.
Yeah. But they like the character. It might as well be them, okay?
But I think this dovetails us very, very nicely. Yes, I saw your sketchy inhaler.
I saw you seeing it.
Into a topic that I think, until we get a check.
I'll stop.
It proceeds to snore harder.
I can't.
Media literacy sure has gone to shit, and we probably need to talk about that. And I want to put some buffers before we talk about media literacy, because here's the thing. I review for Fangirl Nation. I review stuff on my blog. We review stuff here on this show. English and Communications is my degree. I went to a university, and I'm very proud of that degree. It watches me every night while I sleep. Next to my novena candle of Anthony Bourdain.
I do not have a degree, but I did study literature and English language, just pointing out.
But one thing I hear a lot about media literacy and why people are okay with it going to hell is that media literacy is classist. That not everyone can afford that big fancy degree. I couldn't afford it either. That's why I have student loans.
No one in America can afford it.
You don't want to know how much I have in debt. You really don't.
No. I want to sleep at night, actually.
But that it's classist. It's classist to expect people to care or to know about or to think about on a higher level what they're ingesting. To To which the only words I have for that are, that's horse shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to let Sam take the floor on that because they are much better equipped to answer that question than I am, because I love being media literate. I am aware that everything that I watch is trying to tell or sell me something.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't ruin a lot of things. It definitely has ruined some things. But let's talk about this death of media literacy, and especially like the arguments against it, starting with classism.
Okay. As you said correctly, it's horseshit. To elaborate and extrapolate, like, one of the first things I noticed when you brought that up, I was like, funny you should say that, because the Hays Code, you remember what that was? It came about like 90 years ago.
Yep.
And one of the biggest arguments always when it comes to control of media and censorship in media is people who are vulnerable need to be protected. And that in these days they usually mean a lot of ableism and racism and classism and ageism all at the same time.
Yes.
Because they're thinking we have to protect the people who aren't mentally deficient, and that could include all people who can't afford a nice big education, which in its own way obviously is fucked up. Because like you could have like a Christian minister who has has like some kind of crazy PhD, but like still thinks that like orc massage is going to like set the world ablaze to the end times. And so like when it comes to like discussing class and things, that it really bothers me, because like even just going through some of the arguments is like, one of the things they argued about films was the same thing they argue about the internet now. Is they're like, films are difficult to monitor and control. They're like, anybody could sneak into a film and see it. And the mobility of film, the ease of picture distribution, because the possibility of duplicating positives in large quantities, aka pirating copies, etc. This art reaches places unpenetrated by other forms of art. Psychologically, the larger the audience, the lower the moral mass resistance to suggestion. End quote. No picture should lower the moral standards of those who see it. And it must not be allowed to appear so attractive, and they're talking about evil acts, that the emotions are drawn to desire or approve, and then forget it's supposed to be condemned because they only remember the apparent joy of the sin. So if you watch Hannibal, I hate to break it to you, everybody, you're gonna kill someone and eat them. It's just the facts of life.
I mean, I still haven't watched Hannibal, but maybe Amanda has some confessions you want to.
Can I help you?
No, I'm just saying. Clearly, you're supposed to be a mass murderer.
Oh, not a mass murderer. I don't want that much attention.
No, just a serial. It just means you did it more than once. You got a little hobby.
I couldn't keep up with that sheer number. You always got to keep it low, just under the radar, just enough to scare the natives, but never to be on anyone's suspect list.
Taking notes.
One of the other thing too is that, like, aside from them, they always use children, people who are like neurodivergent, usually autistic, and then like women. All that's left are white men to lead us into the right way to watch TV. And it's like one of the articles I like is called "More Than Music: Conservative Christian Anti-Rock Discourse in U.S. Culture Wars." And like one of the key points in that you'll see, it's mirrored every decade in things that I read and find, including like a paper that was from like 1898, I believe. But in here, I'll just read this portion. Is, in addition to their fears of supernatural evil, all three conservative Christian critics' claims about Rock's Beat were grounded in the concept of a duality between the mind and body. In this conception, white men were the most associated with reason and the spirit, the mind, while women and children are more primitive or lower class peoples existed outside of rationality and were thus associated with the physical flesh, the body. It's no surprise that then these Christian critics aimed their crusade at youth. Not only were teens more likely to listen to rock and roll, they were also more susceptible to the music's effective powers and demons because they were not fully rational adults. This is the 60s still, before your brain is done at 25. Similarly, conservative Christian critics argued that non-whites were more vulnerable than whites to rock music's evil and the satanic presence invited, because the notion was that race and rhythmic music are linked in dangerous ways, blah, blah, long time. But it's linked to the non-rational body, racialized body, the feminized and youthful body as disruptive of social order. And in the 1920s, psychologist Carl Jung claimed that an entire culture could be infected by another culture's rhythms, which is where you see people say, Yaoi infects LGBTQ culture. I've seen people say BL infects, it ruins, it spreads, it corrupts. And it's like, it's the same thing. Yeah. They're like, this Asian media is infecting our pure white Western media.
Yeah, I think that's what's always so shocking to me when I read about this stuff is like, none of this is new.
Yep.
Yeah.
None of this is new. We've been doing this for hundreds of years.
I keep quoting her, but in one of my classes, which was like literature and history, we had an entire class that just focused on literature, English literature in relation to the French Revolution. And the professor kept telling us that, remember that revolutions are cyclical. So, things will get so progressive that they will regress. And that is basically what is happening, right? That is what we're seeing. It's just the same thing being recycled.
Right. And I think that that's fascinating, again, like coming from these like older fandom spaces that exactly like we've gone from, these were very racist, sexist, homophobic spaces.
Yeah.
Again, brown, queer, and biologically female in a lot of like fan spaces. It was hell for many years. And then we get like the white Tumblr savior activist woman, and things are marginally better, but that archetype of a person is just as irksome. And then you have the fame race to the margins, where it's the thing that especially in very like, it's a phenomenon where white women especially will take on labels in an attempt to diminish their own privileges. So like, oh yeah, I know about the race to the margins. So like the massive influx that you had with like Tumblr white activists saying that they're autistic. Not that autism isn't real, not that autism isn't valid, but the massive influx of it and being used as a shield when anyone said you're speaking from a place of privilege.
Especially when it comes to queer activism and like our contacts with BL.
Exactly. So we had this period where we started xenophobic, racist, homophobic, and sexist, and we've gone back around to where we're xenophobic, racist, homophobic, and sexist. And it's exactly right about revolutions.
It's got a little twist. It's a rainbow hat. It's for feminism, guys.
Right. And, it's fascinating because, like, French Revolution, Thomas Jefferson here in the U.S. loved the French Revolution. He wanted our revolution to be more like the French Revolution. He had the biggest boner for the French Revolution. And all they did was trade a Bourbon for a Bonaparte. They got another emperor. Like, they did. A lot of people died to accomplish the same thing, if not a little bit worse.
Yeah, and that's where that expression, I don't know if it's used as much in English, but we use it a lot in Norwegian, which is essentially revolution eating its children. And that is when they start talking about the reign of terror. And it's, same thing.
Right. So we see this death of media literacy, and some of it is in response to classism. Some of it is also, and I'll admit that like I've been a part of this, has been overly critical fans. I get a lot of the, oh, well, you just don't enjoy anything, do you? It's like, I enjoy a lot of things. But having a valid criticism about how a character is portrayed, how a message is brought forward, about the drama going on behind the scenes doesn't negate that I like this thing. I can do both at the same time.
Yeah.
I can have valid concerns about the message that is being told to me while still very much liking the thing. Um, so you get a lot of like, oh, you don't enjoy anything culture, which was started by internet movie critics like Nostalgia Critic and Cinema Sins, and I hate that I was even once a microcosmal part of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's so much of me that hates that media literacy is dying. One thing I heard all the time was turn off your brain. Can you just turn off your brain?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's called dying. It's right there.
No, thank you.
Yeah, it's called death. And yeah, like there are plenty of movies that I have gone in, could tell you nothing about now, and I've not given it deeper thought.
Mm-hmm.
But liking something, and I'm going to land the plane, means that I care. And, you know, this is a lament to old fandom. Like you mentioned, we had to go out and research. We had to go out and learn. Yes, I remember at the end of every Inuyasha manga, there were these little glossaries.
Yeah.
Like, these are what these words mean.
Yeah.
And like, we had to seek that out. We had to be these voracious consumers of knowledge because while our elders were there to guide us, they only knew so much. Most of them were also Americans who had never been to Japan.
Even like fan translations, when you think about it, we really had like a tiny little educational community, despite it being like for our entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Like Keikaku means plan, you know. That's where all that came from. There were translator notes.
I really miss those translator notes. I mean, this is my moment of lamentation because now you have simulcasts and everything, and they still have the translations, but they are, for some reason, they are so small and like hidden in like a corner. Like, bring back the fan translations when you had like the subtitles, and then you had like the things on the top, the translation note on the top of the screen that was like, this means that. I'm like, thank you.
You make it impossible to see my BL.
I love
I have a full screenshot of like a translation note that I had to pause and read.
I loved doing fandoms back in the day. They were so fun. But I'm fascinated by this like media literacy issue. And I think the thing is, again, it's like these people don't want to learn, because that's the other very, very frustrating part of it, is that when you do meet a Puritan or someone who's an anti, you can give them all the information you want. They don't care.
Yeah, they're not going to read it.
They're not going to read it. They don't want to be better. They don't want to. Yes.
It's like what Dr. Thomas said, and has said in a lot of lectures and panels and things, that, first of all, people aren't going to sit down and read an academic paper.
No.
Because the people who need to read them aren't going to read them. But also, even if you are an academic, like Sam, like Dr. Thomas, like Dr. Welker, who's also been on the show, who are experts on this, who work on this, like do research and can, show scientific evidence that, fiction does not affect reality in the way that the antis are claiming, they're just going to go, oh, but you're biased because you're also a fan of this, or you interact so much with this that you've been brainwashed. And then it's like, it doesn't matter. They're not going to listen.
Right. And that they use that as a shield. So again, it brings in like the classist argument. I hear a lot of ableist arguments too. That it's like, oh, well, I'm neurodivergent. I couldn't understand this. And it's like, I'm also neurodivergent. Hello.
Oh yeah, that. And like, I remember seeing once too, like somebody, it was the same, like, I'm a minor argument. You're like, do you expect me, someone so small and dumb, to be able to, understand this big concept? And they're like older than I was at the time when I like read something worse or saw a worse movie and I was fine. Really, why are you dragging yourself like that? Come on.
Like, you are literally out there crusading on the internet, doing internet activism, like reporting people to their jobs, reporting people to the police, and then you get caught or you get confronted by it, and it's like, oh, but I'm a minor. You can't.
Yeah.
You
And then you're like, well, why are you doing this to begin with?
Yeah, like you gotta decide. Are you an uwu minor who can't be held accountable for
Like,
their?
go be a hall monitor if you need
Yeah.
this, like, rush of, like,
Or are you
power
gonna
and
be,
authority.
or are you gonna be an activist? Like you
Right.
can't do both.
Right, exactly. It's literally that. You can't be both. You can't pull the whole like, oh well, I'm just a neurodivergent minor. Ooh woo. It's like you just got someone fired because you said they were a pedo for liking a random ship.
Like, some, like, Hero Academia, like, bullshit, you know.
It's always
Yeah.
Bakudeku for some reason. Why is it always
Yeah.
Bakudeku? It's always
No,
that.
or it's Kirishima. Remember that person with the
Why
Kirishima
does
tattoo?
yes, and it's like, oh, you're an
God.
actual pedo for liking Kirishima. It's like,
Again, can I just point out again with the whole but they're an actual child. First of all, they are a drawing.
he's a drawing.
Second, how many 15-year-olds do you know that look like that?
I think about that every time I see the characters from Bleach, especially Chad. He's like this giant stacked, like, Brazilian, like, 6'6" model.
He's like,
And I'm like,
Yeah.
I remember every time I'd watch these shows as a kid, even like Samurai Champloo and everything like that, I'm like, oh, everybody's in their mid-20s. In my brain, I'm 14. And, and they're like, this bitch is 2 years older than you. And I'm like, I was like, I don't believe you for a fucking second. And that was me, like, when I was their age.
Right? And I have this, you usually can see like the bottom of it. I have this tapestry, this free tapestry over my couch in my living room.
yes,
And they're all, shirtless. And okay, there's Nagisa, who is a Shota sex demon, but everyone else is like fucking huge and muscly. And I'm like, what 15-year-olds do you know that look like this? Tell me.
When I was
Please.
15, I was setting fires behind the weight room with axe
I was wearing 2 large sweaters and had like
I had a Trigun hoodie. And like long. I had a Trigun hoodie and long braids.
Yep.
And my Samurai Champloo shirt. And I think I think one thing too that people need to recognize, at least when we talk about staying on the path of optimism and not giving in to the throes of despair, which could be quite easy to do, is just people talking about this stuff makes a big difference. Because I mean, like, just when I first got into this stuff, 2019 into like, and then COVID hit and it's like, well, I have all this time,
Oh my god.
And but like the thing is that some of the first aunties I was introduced to were, ex-aunties or and so like there are people out there who will listen. There are people out there who will change. In a lot of cases, like I try to stay optimistic. I like to also just because I can like vouch for personal experiences, but it's like you said earlier, everybody can have a bad take, can unlearn certain things.
Right.
And like sometimes a lot of people just overhear things on the grapevine and they just kind of accept that as fact until they really dive into it. And they're like, I didn't realize that there was so much depth to this. And I appreciate you for telling me. And you're like, wow, that was really nice. And so I think it just depends on where the person's individually at. Because somebody recently apologized to me who had been like really antagonistic about like being anti-Fujoshi. They would pull out all the stops. And they were maybe like around like 18, 19 most. And they apologized to me like a year or two later. And so that they were in a really bad place in school, and then they were doing better, and they actually like read everything on my website, and they were like pro Fujoshi now, and I was like, oh my god, and it's like that's the kind of stuff you want to center in your mind, is that like, even if somebody at that time, doesn't want to open up to these ideas because they need that thing to be mad about, they still can later on,
Right. And I think that kind of puts us where, it's the future of media and fandom is bleak as it seems. And I mentioned this when we talked about anti versus pro ship with Aerie, that I think what I'm waiting for is the new Great Awakening, when a lot of these kids just grow up. Because again, like, think about yourself when you were 14 years old. I don't want to think about that person too long, but like, I don't want to think about that creature for too long. But that creature did not deserve rights. That spiteful little ball of hormones and pure thoughts about the worst fictional men. That creature did not need to vote, did not need to contribute to society. That is
the creature just needed to be a creature.
Right. That is a demiurge if I've ever seen it. Yes, I'm talking about the Master Impossibles.
Leave that creature in its terrarium to creature out until it grows up.
Literally, I was Creature Vash from Trigun manga. Just a biblically accurate fuckwad. But imagine yourself. But I'm not that person anymore.
Oh, you're a person now.
I'm a human being who still deserves rights, despite what the government is trying to do every single day.
Yeah.
So, what I'm hoping for is that a lot of these kids do just grow up, because that's sort of what I do foresee. We saw that with Steven Universe. We saw that with a little bit with Voltron. We saw that with other things that I know. Every time I mention Voltron, there's just like a PTSD flashback.
Yeah. Everybody. Yeah. It's like Akira. Ding! Ah!
Yeah, I didn't
grab your face.
Go there. I wasn't even there. I wasn't even in the country, and I still have PTSD.
But like, what I'm hoping is that they can grow and mature, and that, the thing that I mentioned during our pro ship Andy ship episode is, again, I think this is the place where us as fandom elders do need to carry our slack. I think we let the internet, we let them be iPad kids, and look what happened. Like, instead of being active parents, which is what we had. Wow, that was a beautiful allegory. Good job, Amanda. But like, we let the younger generation be iPad kids instead of having like active fandom role models that we could.
And that's different from like having to be someone's parent. Like, some people want to be like, you need to curate yourself to any child that could hypothetically show up on your doorstep that was never supposed to be there because they were being neglected. And not be upset about it.
No. Please,
like, people. I think fandom elders, in that sense, quote unquote elders, just need to like do what we're doing now. Is just when you spread awareness, when you talk about it, when you provide the resources, which is like what I'm trying to do with like the website that I run.
You're doing it. What do you mean trying to do?
That website is such like a God-given, because just linking people to Fujoshi.Info, like, actually, you are wrong, why don't you look here? It's a very,
and that's where I've got a lot of people who have been like, you'll get the people, of course, who are like, I ain't reading all that, and then you'll still get people who are just like, I didn't know this, cool, thank you, or they'll come back to it like months later, who knows, but it's like, just having that like resources available can help a lot, and keep that healthy boundary between like, here's some educational tools, but I'm not your parent, and don't idolize adults, that tell you they're safe, etc., blah blah blah, and just like
the episode.
What was that last part?
Just like the end of that one Static Shock episode, where it's like, don't trust people that you meet on the internet. But yeah, like, and that's why I'm always very careful with like fandom elders, because like it's like, for me, one of the big sites that I came from was Gendo. I was a DJ on Gendo. I modded for Gendo. I met some of the best friends I've ever met on Gendo.com. And we had our fandom elders there. Like, some of us were like, 15 to 12. Some of us were fucking 30, 40, 50 years old at that point. Like, truly elders. And while of course there were creeps on that site, I'm not naming names, uh, most of our fandom, I have names, I'm not naming names today, uh, today,
That's not that kind of
no,
episode.
that's not what kind of episode we're doing today, but for the most part, it was these people who did know more than we did and were lovingly just trying to. A lot of it also was, and I mentioned ContraPoints earlier, but a lot of it also was almost like it was done out of their own self-interest. It's like, I'm protecting myself by making sure that when you go out into the world, you're less cringe. So, like, I grew up with Black parents.
Uh-huh.
That's the whole reason why I was so behaved. It wasn't for me learning any lesson. It was because if I went out and looked a fool, that made my parents look bad. There was no altruism in my parents raising me the way that they did. It was they didn't want to look bad. So I had to look very, very good. And that was how a lot of our fandom elders treated us. You know, it wasn't that they're doing this to make our lives easier. It was that was the last thing they needed was a bunch of horny 14-year-olds talking about wanting to top a fictional man.
Good luck with that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, good luck with that. Clearly didn't work.
I'm just like thinking about like I was in a completely different zone, but I was just like in middle school I was like drawing like Yu-Gi-Oh pairings with like and just talking about them with like other people.
Yeah, me too.
At 14, I was writing the worst lemons humanly possible. And
I think I can rival them easily because
by 16,
English is not my first language.
By 16, I was selling them for money.
Oh my god!
So like my friends would.
That's incredible.
My friends would come to me and it's like, I want a rape lemon with like this character and this character, and it's like, you got cash, and it's like, yeah. So I was just like slinging like rape fanfic and like bondage and non-con and age gaps, and I made pretty decent money doing it. I got paid in a lot of things that weren't money, but I'll take a chocolate chip cookie to write this Kakashi X Sasuke fanfic for you.
I love how ranged our experiences are. I was one of those kids that would like, you know, I was like, is the coast clear? You know, I click on something, but I'll have like my hands near my face in case I need to nope out, and I see something I don't like. I was like the complete opposite.
I had, you know,
Weenie Hut Junior over here.
Nope.
I had no fandom friends. And again, like when I first got into, like I got into fanfiction and everything through Team Rocket Fix, and like, you know, Baby's first ship was straight and also canon and loves of my life, but I had nobody else to talk to about it except the people on the internet. So I would literally force like my grandma, who is my best friend, to like listen to me rave about this fix that I was reading and also writing because I had nobody else. I was like, I need you, and she was like, wow. So she led him to the bedroom, huh? That's I'm like, yes.
Oh god. When I was in like ninth grade, I watched Gravitation with my mom, and I watched Suki Show. Suki Show.
God. How did she take it? Did you like it?
Well, yeah, she was like, "This is fine," you know.
But like clearly,
not like all Suki Show, but like at least a couple episodes.
That sounds so nice. My aunt saw an episode of Full Metal Alchemist and said, "This is satanic pornography," and it's like, you don't know what I'm writing about these characters.
You're like, girl, you know what porn is.
But like, I feel like I peaked. Like my parents, at least my mom. I don't know. My dad isn't. He doesn't care about anything that isn't his own hobbies. But so he doesn't know what I'm doing half the time. But my mom, you know, is like, I don't know how much she's known about all of these things I've been getting up to ever since I got into BL, but she's definitely been aware of it. She knows that I write it, you know, she knows that I write these novels. And I feel like I've reached some sort of victory point because not too long ago, she was like, we watched a movie together and she was like, oh, we should do this again soon. Maybe you can show me that Thai series you talk about.
No,
like,
you are not corrupting your mother with
my mom wants to see
I will not. No, I will fly up there and I will take your mom on the nicest shopping weekend You are not corrupting your mother.
She can take it. It's fine. I just have
No.
to.
My dad
I just have to.
proofread my papers for the publishing papers, so he knows all about
Wow.
and
That
like
sounds
grad femmes
so
and everything.
nice. But I think, the future, I think, of course, like anything, is going to get darkest before the dawn. That is going to get a
Yeah.
little bit worse before it gets
Yeah.
better. I mean, for the US, we're in election year. There
Yeah.
are
Again?
yeah,
Every
half of this
every
year,
4 years, buddy, and every 2 years for like some
everything else.
non-presidential. That's
Yeah.
I'm not
We're-
ready.
Neither
Wait,
are we.
girl!
Get in line. Yeah, get in line. None of us are
This
ready.
is like the first year where everything's literally like up in the air. I'm like, I don't know what could happen. I have no idea what could happen.
I am saying it right
You don't even know
now.
if the nominee can be on the ballot.
I am opening up the borders for you. Like, if you guys need
Thank you.
somewhere to escape to, I got you.
Yeah, I'm going to be renewing my passport this spring.
Yeah, it's time to shout
hold
out
you
to
to it.
Dana Tex. Could you imagine me being a citizen of Denmark
No,
through marriage?
why? No,
But I think it will
not
get
Denmark. No.
okay. Go find a Norwegian.
Okay, I'll find you Norwegian.
I don't like how threatening that sounded. I'm going to be married off to the badger that lives in your backyard. So I think it will get worse before it gets better. I also think just the benefit of a lot of the shows that are contentious are either wrapping up or the fandom is louder than the haters. Because as much as I love watching My Hero Academia fans tear each other apart, because I do.
I like to just stay away personally.
Like, I'm tired.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, but that fandom is so much louder than the people who are just incorrect. Like, we have all of these like BL movies that have been coming out, these BL series that are coming out. Like, we are truly winning. Like,
Yeah. And that newest Scarlet Berryco book is being the newest one's being translated in at least 12 languages all at the same time.
right.
We're getting to a place where piracy of like, small authors, in that sense, would be more of a thing of the past. Because like when we were growing up, and it's like you don't know the ethics of piracy when you're like 14, and you're like, that's a whole other country away I barely know anything about, because otherwise either the book would never be released, or it could take 2 to literally like 4 or 5 years until it comes to the States in the early 2000s.
Or you lived somewhere where it never came out. But I just want to point out with the whole Scarlet Medical thing that is so exciting. And like it's coming out simultaneously in 12 languages. And I was like so excited. And then it's the US release. And in Europe, it's coming in April. I'm like,
But
we don't get it until April. But it's the same. But it's the English release. I don't get it. It's the same copy. Why me?
But
like order it through Amazon English.
Yeah, I might, but the shipping.
Yeah.
But I also want to just tack on to before we move on.
Please.
And I'm sorry. I am sorry, Amanda. I have to mention them, but I just want to
No, you
point out
don't.
the huge thing that happened this week, which was that the Thai Ministry of Commerce had endorsed and backed the new BL series from Beyond Cloud to use it.
I saw that post.
Yeah, to help push the legislation for same-sex marriage equality in Thailand. Like, they are literally using BL and they're being endorsed by the ministry. Like, we are living in amazing times. I can't believe this is actually happening. And then people are like, and again, BL doesn't have to be realistic. It doesn't have to be activism. But like, they are out there pushing marriage equality. They're
all intrinsically linked. It's kind of like how being queer in itself, is an act of rebellion.
Yeah, exactly.
Even when you're not trying, to actively, like, just existing.
And I think, so that actually brings up a point, and we'll wrap up because it's been almost 2 hours. But like, I remember this like with RuPaul's Drag Race, where Drag Race used to be a show that was almost exclusively watched by queer people, especially queer people of color. And then in seasons, it became really, really popular with like cishet fans, especially young cishet fans. And it lost a lot of its political and sexual tooth because you get that conversation again of like, oh, well, we can't expose the children. The children don't need to know about Stonewall. The children don't need to know.
We don't want to have those uncomfortable interactions.
We don't want to talk about the AIDS crisis. We don't want to talk about this, but it's like, drag has always been political.
Yes.
Especially drag in the US. Being queer has always been, like, there is no apolitical drag queen, which is why the series got so much flack for, like, so I'm not a Maddie Morphosis stan. Maddie Morphosis was the first, like, cis-het queen on the show. And, like, she's great. Love her. But it's like, you are the reason, you are everything about modern Drag Race that queer people hate. That you have taken this thing and stripped it of all of its context to just be man in a wig. When it was never just that. But we see that with BL. We see that with anime. We see that with manga. We see that with superheroes. And, like, it went from being this, like, really, really intimate conversation between marginalized groups. In our last episode, we talked about, queer shipping and Western fandom space, about comic books, and how a lot of that were these very, very niche conversations had between Jewish people, between people of color, and other marginalized communities. That anime became a lot of that. Again, like, Black fan who is diasporate, who did not feel culturally tethered to the U.S. or to Africa, found a lot of solace in fictional Japan. Right, found a lot of comfort in fictional Japan. So, because as these things got more popular, now we've opened up. But I think two things are going to happen, and these are just my hot takes. One, I think we're going to see a reconquista where especially older and mid-tier fans are going to circle the phalanxes and start pushing out a lot of those voices, because we are all tired of having our shit ruined. Two, those kids are just going to grow up. And they're going to realize that they're wrong. Is that going to be the solution for all of them? No. Some of them will eventually metamorphosize into their true form, which is a rad femme or a TERF. But
a white supremacist.
Or just a full-on trad wife white supremacist. But I think a lot of them will just grow up.
Yeah, and that's a thing that's been on my mind for, like, this part of the conversation, that at some point, unless you have, a mental breakdown when you realize that you don't wake up at 20 and you've lost all your interests, because that just magically
life isn't over.
No, but you will become a fandom elder. That and so cultivate that space for yourself. Like, listen to your fandom elders who have been there and make make the space livable for everybody.
Yeah. And, like, I agree with you guys, and I think, like, it's like, this is what I always hammer home, but it's just like people talking about stuff and spreading awareness about things makes such a huge difference. Because, when I started out doing this stuff, like 3 to 4 years ago, about 4 years ago now, like, it was in a spot, including for myself, because it was still unknown territory, is like a lot of people were scared, and a lot of people were just like, it was like, well, as long as I stay out of sight, as long as I don't make too much noise, or if I agree with some people on the easy stuff, you get a lot of that with, like, lolly shoda, like, discourse, if I take the easy dunk, and it's like, well, of course I hate, this obviously, like, terrible thing in real life, and people just, the more, like, I would start to do research and then like share things and speak out about things, like, the more other people would as well. And, like, people would get interested. They're like, how can I do my own research? And people would I would see people, like, tag me every so often and share articles I've shared to other people. And I've visibly noticed the change in the past 4 years of, like, people not knowing anything about BL and Fujoshi to now, like, there could be hundreds of people who will, like, come in and correct someone who's spreading misinformation or harmful stereotypes, misogyny and transphobia, homophobia, and they'll just do it themselves. And, like, it's like, it makes me feel like it's all worth it, but just the fact of people just speaking up has made it, I think, so that some people realize their opinions aren't as popular as they thought they were because people were too disorganized and like isolated to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they just didn't have those tools where it's like, well, I know this isn't how like fiction works, but like I don't know how to, you know, articulate like a whole like paper. Because like I know some people like sent the paper, the anti-fan paper I wrote to the therapist, so their therapist would understand, you know, what was happening when they were talking to them about these things. And so like that's why I'm optimistic, is like just from like the past 4 years of just what I've been doing, you know, and what you guys in Station have been doing, you know, like some people talking on panels, running podcasts, etc. Because a lot of people who I, you know, hopped onto and was like, you know, what do you know about this thing? And I just kind of gathered all the information that they had and all the things that I found on my own and put them in one spot so that knowledge would not be lost or hard to find. And then like everybody just kind of, there's a little renaissance, you know.
There is. And I mean, I always think about like how different our fan experiences would be if we had the resources that we had today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I also don't want to think about the absolute monster I would have become. Because if you thought my porn writing was bad then, he gives me access to the wider internet. Oh shit. I would be a professional smut writer. I'd be like a full Harlequin dime store novelist, just writing trashy like.
I will fully support you.
Shout out to Quinn, not yet a sponsor, but they do like audio versions of like Harlequin stories. So it's just like men moaning into your ear for like several minutes, and I don't know how I feel about it.
You sit there like alone, you're like, cool. How long does this have left?
Are there any wet pasta noises in those?
I've not heard a single wet pasta noise.
Thank God.
I've heard wet pasta noises, no awkward churning, no. So it's just breathing in, groaning, and talking to no one because they're the only voices that are recorded, which doesn't make sense to me. That it's just the one guy.
But that is like those Automake ASMR drama CDs that are just like there's some hot dude talking to you and you're supposed to be the receiver. I don't like those.
I'm not an anime twink. I don't want that.
I sometimes click on those because I think they're BL, and then I realize no, this is one dude, and it is a.
You're being perceived. And
it's a.
You like nope out.
As a woman, I'm like, this is not.
Like, ew, don't talk to me.
Yeah, like, don't perceive.
Where is the other man? Where is the other man?
Literally us. I've had a great time talking about this topic. We could literally be here all day, and I'm excited.
This is wonderful.
And I'm excited that Sam will be joining us in our live towards the end of the month because we can talk about this topic for hours. Sam, is there anything that you'd like to promote? Is there any project that you're working on?
Well, the core thing that I always like to promote is just the website where I put all the resources, which was www.Fujoshi.Info. And that's the main thing. On there is like at the very top, you'll find the full database of site resources, which is where I basically put every source I've ever found and come across, read, etc., that I found useful or relevant in any way to all of these purity, BL, LGBTQ, feminism, etc., human rights discussions, and I put them all there. And so far we have almost 400 resources.
That is amazing. That site is amazing. And if you haven't visited yet, please do.
Yes. Genuinely one of the best resources that I've seen on the modern internet. It reminds me of the days of old because we're both old. Carl and I.
It's like spreadsheets are my passion. You know, it's just a spreadsheet that's got all the data in there.
and we
But I think
appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think it is so easily accessible as well. You
Mhm.
know, like as much as I love academic texts and, reading actual research, it is something about like having like an archive like that is so, so accessible to anyone
And I
anywhere.
have some quotes, excerpts
Yeah.
copy pasted that things I found most important, then I'll link to the full thing. But just like
Yeah.
4 pieces to pull out of them for people
And you
to
have
just
like
get those
you have
bite-sized
like
elements.
yeah, and like you have like a glossary of, what means what
Mhm.
and
Hmm.
like yeah,
Yeah,
very useful.
It's fun to tend. It's
yeah,
like I suck at gardening, so this is the next best thing. Like website gardening. I'm like knowledge, love
knowledge
it.
farming.
I
Knowledge
love that.
farming. Yes. So I've
Gotta
pruned and refined it over the months and years.
put
Like,
that English degree to good use. But it's been it's been truly phenomenal to have you on, Sam. We appreciate
Yeah.
you so much. This is the part of the show where we thank our patrons over on patreon.com. I am still not reading out names because we did have an issue where one of our patrons said, "Hey, please stop reading out my legal name." And I was like, "Oh shit." So here's your chance to update your names in Patreon so I can go back to reading them out because we appreciate all of you. Uh, Also, your Patreon support helps us buy gifts for our guests. We usually send our guests a little something. So if you'd like to support the show, you can do so at patreon.com/Yaoi Shelf. Patrons get an exclusive video every single month on top of the regularly scheduled programming, behind the scenes looks, and more information, including our last patron video, which was me fighting off lawnmowers and finally getting my voice back.
It was wild.
It was wild. Um, Remember, your engagement helps us out a lot, and be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share, scribe.
Subscribe.
Corolla, what are we
subscribe.
talking about? What are we talking about next month?
Oh my god, I'm just gonna read this little thing in our outline because I think it's so well written.
Oh, thank you. I
Guys,
read that.
I think it's funny. Guys, hop aboard the SS Gaslight. We're going to be talking about piracy, monopolies, and the history of piracy as part of BL and Yaoi fandom and the fan experience. So put on your little
Da-da-da.
pirate hats.
Yep. So put on your pirate hats. We're finally talking about it. I was going to say we've been edging this topic, and I don't like the image that brought to mind. We've been discussing this topic.
What, you don't like edging pirates now? Personally, I think it sounds. This reminds me that I haven't seen season 2 of Our Flag Means Death yet.
I don't
And I
like
need
what
to
you
get
just
on that.
put into my brain, and this is your fault. And
Stay
I
on topic, girl.
I don't
Dedicated.
like.
Dedicated to me.
I don't like that. I still have to finish that boy slut airy fic. Leave me alone.
Yeah, but I have emotional damage related to that one.
God, I have like 30 BL on my shelf that I have to read.
Oh,
you have
back to
emotional
like-
damage, but you still
I-
read it and liked it.
I have plenty.
I did. Yeah, I don't will. I could go like no, but yeah, if you follow me on Twitter or Insta, I went through a lot of emotional trauma today watching yesterday's episode of Dead Friend Forever. So I'm not okay.
Sounds like a fun time.
But
No.
I'm excited to talk about it because, yeah, we've been mentioning piracy and monopolies and just how integral piracy was
Yeah.
as a part of the early fan experience. Something that I think especially younger fans probably don't understand is just how fucking vital it was to be a pirate back in those days. So I'm excited to talk about it, especially in this new and changing media landscape where we have the worst monopolies I've ever seen.
I
Yeah.
hated it.
Just the worst monopolies.
The intention was probably good, but what we got
Is not
The
great.
intention was never good.
Yeah,
okay,
it's-
Any.
you're right. Never mind. I was trying to be nice.
It's like one of those blobs in like a movie or a monster game that just absorb,
Yeah.
you know. And you're just like, please, somebody kill it already.
Yeah.
Legislation, help me, save me, legislation.
Legislation,
Save me.
Remember,
I hate that.
enshrined in our Constitution is a clause where Black people are still 3/5 of a regular person.
I know. the very least, we can still blame Ronald Reagan for most of our
I
problems.
can blame Ronald Reagan for whatever I want. If I'm having a bad day, it's Ronald Reagan's fault.
I mean, honestly.
If I have a flat tire, it's Reagan's fault.
It wasn't even our president. I still blame him. Everything the U.S. does affects the rest of the world. So, like, thank you.
And then, like, we're over here like, excuse me, Britain. When Britain's like, yeah, those guys are fucked up. I'm like, how do you think this happened?
Right. And also, don't you guys have acid and knife attacks? It's like, at least I don't have to send my kid to school with a bulletproof backpack. Yeah, you guys just get stabbed a lot. And then men throw acid at women.
Yeah.
So, different, but also the same. Anyway.
That's how it encompasses to the discussion of everybody's got their own dirt in the closet they need to clean out first.
Absolutely. But I had
mind your business.
Yeah. I had a great time talking about this with Sam. I'm so glad that we had Sam on the show. We're excited for him to join us in our live, where we will, I'm sure, answer more questions in our Patreon episode.
Yeah.
We will be what are we talking about in Patreon?
I cannot remember for the life of me.
I will be back.
I'm so glad.
I'm so glad. Let me see. I have to pull up one of our 5 calendars in Patreon. Of course, I don't have anything listed. We'll figure it out. But thank you so much, Sam, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Any day, like
any day, please.
This was literally the easiest choice we could have ever made.
Like, bother me anytime.
If our audience wants to follow Sam, where can they do that?
Yes,
you can do that at. Can they see my name scrolling at the bottom there?
They sure can.
It was, and on Twitter is at Sam Aburime, and as well as Blue Sky.
Yes.
And Rainy Studios, one word on Tumblr, etc. If you care about my art, well, most people don't even know I draw, and that's fine.
About your art.
Huh?
We know about your art. We care about your art.
Yeah. Oh, I know you do. Thank you.
But we will also include all of that information in the description below. I had such a great time discussing this topic. It's so good to be back. It's so good to have my voice. It's so good to be feeling better. And, what a great way to kick off Black History Month and everything else that's going on.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Black History Month, where, of course, we get the shortest month of the year.
At least it has one more day this year. Ooh.
Yep. And we still have to share it with other groups.
Yeah.
we get the shortest month, and then we have to.
Like it's
mine. So thank you guys for listening, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.